What's up, everybody? This is Jonas, and welcome to Wrestling with Jonas, the first podcast of its kind from me. I've been listening to wrestling podcasts for quite a few years now. You name it, Talk is Jericho, Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, Steve Austin. The list goes on and on and on. I probably subscribe to over 20 wrestling channels, probably far too many to catch up with during an average week. And I thought, I can do this. I'll start my own wrestling podcast. It's going to be a weekly podcast focusing mostly on NXT, NXT UK, maybe a little bit of standard WWE in there, main roster WWE, anything special going on throughout the wrestling world, whether it be New Japan, Ring of Honor, across the Indies. I'm a big fan of Progress in the UK, and of course the WWE pay-per-views as and when they happen. Bit of a build-up to any of those, and any recaps from the shows. But yeah, I'm really excited to bring you the first episode of Wrestling with Jonas. My name isn't actually Jonas, it's a nickname given to me by my wife, but hey, it's a good wrestling handle. I've been a wrestling fan for over 26 years now. So my first taste of wrestling was probably back in the late 80s when the World of Sport used to be on ITV over here in the UK on a Saturday afternoon, and I would watch it with my nan, my grandmother, and we would watch Danny Boy Collins and Giant Haystacks and Big Daddy and Bomber Pat Roach and all those old British favourites, which is probably how a lot of wrestling fans started their introduction with wrestling. And then back in the early 90s, I think it was late 91, around the time of the Survivor Series that year in the WWF at the time, when Jake Roberts got his King Cobra to bite the arm of Macho Man Randy Savage, and you could see the blood trickling down the Macho Man's arm as he was tied up in the ropes, and it was quite a graphic introduction to the world of professional wrestling at the time. But thoroughly, it really sucked me in, thoroughly enjoyable. That was around the time when Ric Flair first came to WWF. Didn't really know him from his NWA, WCW days. So that was all new to me and gave me a great opportunity to learn about characters like Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan at the time as well, when he was battling The Undertaker at the 91 Survivor Series. Then we fast forward a little bit to 1992 with the Royal Rumble, and of course that was an amazing event. Well, the main event was very good. The undercard was okay. Great to see Owen Hart in that tag match with Coco Beware against the Oriental Express in them very baggy wrestling pants of his. But still, a really, really excellent and very memorable main event with Ric Flair pretty much going from start to finish to not only win the Royal Rumble, but to win the WWF title at the time. I went to a few WWF live house shows in the UK back in 1992, and then I was lucky enough, I think I was at the tender age of possibly, what would I have been, 16, to attend my first pay-per-view, WWF pay-per-view, when the WWF came to the UK for SummerSlam at Wembley, London, England. Over 80,000 people. It was a fantastic day. The build-up to the event was great. Travelling down to London on the day on a coach with my dad and two of my friends. Fantastic experience. Waiting outside with tens of thousands of people that were really, really enthusiastic. Couldn't wait to get inside the stadium. Lots of merchandise being sold. A baking hot day. We get inside. We were quite high up, but you could still see the ring fairly well. And the show as a whole was very, very good. It was entertaining for what it was back then, when it was very character driven. The WWF, had some good experience in the ring with the likes of Ted DiBiase and Erwin R. Shyster, the Legion of Doom. Matches like that, there was a few that you really could have done without. For example, Nails versus Virgil and the Bushwhackers. But hey, it's all characters that I grew up with back in the early 90s. And of course, the main event, one of the all-time classics, not just in SummerSlam history, but in WWF history. Bret Hart versus Davey Boy Smith, with Bret Hart going into the main event as the Intercontinental Champion, and Davey Boy Smith, after around about 25 minutes, overcoming Bret Hart in one of the all-time classic 5-star matches to win the Intercontinental Champion. Now, what was also unique about that match is it did go on last. It was the main event for the Intercontinental Champion, and usually wouldn't get the Intercontinental Champion highlighting or headlining any show. Traditionally, it was always the WWF Heavyweight Championship or Hulk Hogan that would go on last, but no Hulk Hogan this time around. And the WWF Championship was shown earlier on in the event, earlier on in the card, with Ultimate Warrior versus Macho Man. However, when the broadcast was aired in America, they did switch it around, and they did have Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior for the WWE Championship closing the show. The other unique thing about the main event of Bret Hart versus Davey Boy was that it was babyface versus babyface, and you didn't usually get that, but the crowd was red hot all night. Very, very memorable. Anyway, throughout the years, I've been to quite a few WWE shows. And yes, I was lucky enough to attend my first ever WrestleMania this year. So pretty much 26 years from when I first started my wrestling fandom, I was lucky enough to be able to go to New Orleans to see WrestleMania 34. I spent the whole week out there going to various events, a couple of sessions at WWE Access, a couple of sessions at WrestleCon, various other live shows including NXT Takeover, Monday Night Raw, as well as WrestleMania. I think we'll talk more about that week in New Orleans as we get closer to WrestleMania 35, taking place in New York, New Jersey in April 2019. So what I'd like to do to kick off this first episode is to talk about this week's episode of NXT UK. So shown on the WWE Network, the November the 7th episode. I think this was one of the many episodes filmed in Cambridge, the Corn Exchange. And they actually showed 2 episodes again this week, similar to last week. I think they're trying to catch up on their episodes because there was quite a long period before they actually aired the first one from the first recordings back in July. So the November the 7th episode kicked off with Bomber Dave Mastiff versus Damien Weir. So Damien Weir you may know from the UK independents as Damien Dunn. And in real life, brother of the Bruiserweight Pete Dunne. So essentially it was a bit of a squash match. It only lasted 2 minutes. There wasn't much, if any, offense from Damien Weir. There was quite an impressive spot during the match where Mastiff executed a massive one-arm vertical suplex throw on Weir, and then followed that up with a running cannonball into the corner. Very, very impressive outing by Mastiff. This is his second showing on NXT UK since it began 4 or 5 weeks ago. Mastiff, although he's quite a stocky guy, he must be close to or over 300 pounds, and it was a very fast and powerful outing from Mastiff. He's shown some dominance in the ring, definitely one to watch for the future. And he's wrestled twice on NXT UK and won twice, both in very dominant fashion. Watch out for Dave Mastiff in the future. I've seen him live a couple of times. Very, very impressive wrestler. Then the show went into a bit of a recap from last week's main event, where Flash Morgan came to the aid of Mark Andrews after his match with Wolfgang. And Mark Andrews was being attacked by the Coffey brothers, who were laying the beating into Andrews. Wolfgang walked back to the ring and laid in to Mark Andrews as well, turning heel on the NXT UK audience and aligning with the Coffey brothers. Next we saw a vignette for Ligero, who is in action next, and we saw a similar vignette for James Drake, who appears to be Ligero's partner in the next match. Then we saw another vignette for Ginny, the fashionista. Ginny is an excellent UK women's wrestler who featured this year in the Mae Young Classic. you may remember, and has been the Progress Women's Champion this year earlier on, and is an excellent, very, very impressive female wrestler. A really good. I've enjoyed these kind of like magazine fashion style vignettes that have happened over the last 3 weeks on NXT UK, and we are due to see Ginny next week. Then we had a bit of a backstage segment from Danny Burch, just reminding us that we have Danny Burch versus Pete Dunne in the main event of this particular episode. Before that, however, we went into the match between Ligero and James Drake. So this is the second match for Ligero. He won his first match a few weeks earlier. I think it was actually the first match of the first episode of NXT UK 4 weeks ago. Now, James Drake is one half of the grizzled young veterans with Zach Gibson, Liverpool's number one. There was a great chant from the crowd as the match got going because James Drake has a picture of himself, picture of his face on the backside of his trunks, and the chant was he's got his own face on his arse, which was highly hilarious. And got the match started with quite a bit of heat. Bit of a slow start to the match, however, James Drake did take control with a vicious attack in the corner to Ligero. A fantastic code red from Ligero to start his comeback against Drake. Drake hit back with a cracking drop kick in the corner, a very strong drop kick for a very good 2 count. And Ligero hit a springboard DDT to hit the 3 count for the eventual win in just under 6 minutes. So quite a built into a fast-paced, action-packed match with lots of crowd heat and another very good victory for Ligero. There was a backstage interview with Toni Storm talking about her up-and-coming match with Dakota Kai. And Dakota enters the frame. Both women shake hands ahead of their match, which is going to be on next week's episode. Ashton Smith vignettes next, talking about more about his character. I think up until now we don't really know a lot about Ashton Smith. This certainly helped to paint a better picture of this particular character. Quite a big guy, tall, muscular, got a good look. He's been on NXT UK a couple of times. We'll see where he goes. Bit of character development for many of the new faces here. Zach Gibson was up next in a backstage vignette to hype up his match against Amir Jordan next week, and Zach Gibson is definitely the biggest, baddest heel in NXT UK so far. Then we're about to get a match with Ashton Smith, but we didn't find out who Ashton Smith's partner was because Wolfgang and the Coffee Brothers attacked Smith on his entrance, all three of them looking very menacing on the stage, with some quite amusing crowd heat and chants from the audience. The Coffee Brothers and Wolfgang entered the ring and gave quite a menacing promo, lots of crowd heat and chanting from the audience. Coffee talking about being the hierarchy of NXT UK. No more British strong style and no more big strong boys, they said. Coffee finished the promo by stating, "This is our kingdom." So quite a strong presence there. I like the way that NXT UK is building up its characters. It's clearly defining its heels and its baby faces, and the Coffee Brothers, along with Wolfgang, certainly appeared to be merging together quite a strong unit there. Eddie Dennis, is up next. We've had quite a few promos and vignettes from Eddie Dennis, pretty much from episode 1, stating how he was a headmaster at a secondary comprehensive school in the UK, and while he was busy building himself a career, he saw friends from the past such as Pete Dunne, Flash Morgan Webster, Mark Andrews get signed by WWE, make names for themselves, and he feels like that was his opportunity and his chance, that they were taken from him. So now he's part of the NXT UK brand, and after the last 3 or 4 weeks of them building Eddie Dennis's character in vignettes like this, he finally makes his debut in his first match against Sid Scala. So much in the same way we had with Damien Weir in the opening match, this was definitely another squash match. Dennis's music is a very menacing, piece of music as he takes the slow menacing walk to the ring. His promos over the last 4 weeks have built himself to very well leading up to his debut tonight. Scala made a brief comeback during the early stages of the match, but it was all about Dennis in the end, regaining control with very strong elbow to the face. Not long recovered from the very serious shoulder injury, Eddie Dennis, and he had one of his return matches against Mark Andrews at a Progress event at Wembley Arena at the beginning of October, the Hello Wembley show, which, if you haven't seen it, you need to try and find it. You need to sign up to Progress on Demand to catch this match, but the video package leading up to the match, Eddie Dennis versus Mark Andrews for this Progress match at Wembley, was outstanding, better than you'll see anywhere at the moment, and that really kind of sold me on Eddie Dennis. I saw Eddie Dennis wrestle a few times a few years back, but that was something that really opened my eyes up to this wrestler. So having not long recovered from a serious shoulder injury, he's now making his debut for NXT UK. Sorry, Scala tried to make a bit of a comeback with a slap to the face and a high cross body, but it was a very short-lived comeback. Dennis pulls Scala out of the corner with the 7 bridge razor's edge type move into the opposite corner's turnbuckle. Dennis has finished Scala off with a massive side slam maneuver called the Next Stop Driver and finished the match in just 4 minutes. The next match that we have to look forward to next week is Tony Storm versus Dakota Kai, as I mentioned earlier, and the Coffey Brothers versus Wolfgang and Mark Andrews, Flash Morgan Webster and Ashton Smith in a 3 versus 3 6-man match on next week's episode. Pete Dunne versus Danny Burch is the next match, and this is the main event for hour 1 for this week's NXT UK show, and it's for the WWE UK Championship. There's a really big fight feel in the arena here at the Corn Exchange in Cambridge. Burch enters first, followed by Pete Dunne with the UK Championship belt firmly held between his teeth. They mention how Pete Dunne's reign has lasted for longer than Asuka's did, with the reign currently lasting 540 days for Dunne. So really good ovation for both participants here. We have the formal introductions, then the match begins. Both men trade stiff blows to start the match, before Dunne put Burch into an excruciating submission hold on Burch's arms and fingers. It looked really painful. It was strange seeing Burch on the mat for such a long period of time, but Burch did manage to make a comeback, only to be knocked down to the canvas once again with a huge forearm. Burch made a comeback with a headlock, only for Dunne to reach for the ropes before dragging Burch out to the floor with an X-Plex on the apron. A vicious soccer kick to the elbow from Dunne, followed by Dunne putting added pressure on the challenger's already injured arm and fingers. Dunne supposedly playing the role of a heel in this match, with the crowd firmly getting behind Danny Burch, helping him to a comeback and an impressive second rope drop kick, followed by a powerbomb and a knee strike for a close 2 count. Definitely a back and forth match, with Dunne taking control yet again, going back to the injured left arm and hand of Burch. Dunne took the match to the outside once again, but Burch took swift advantage by taking Dunne's legs away from him, leading Dunne to land face first onto the steel steps. Followed by a massive slam on the padding outside, Dunne makes it back into the ring just before the 10 count with both men back inside. Burch hit the champion with a huge overhead suplex for a very close 2 count. Both men battle once again with stiff blows and some excellent hard-hitting moves being traded between the two individuals, including an incredible lariat from Burch for another strong 2 counts. Burch hit a headbutt to Dunne, followed by a draping DDT for another nail-biting 2 count. The crowd are really getting behind the challenger as he applies a crossface on Dunne, causing the champ to be very close to tapping out. Dunne eventually escapes in order to hit the bitter end for another close 2 count. The fans are on their feet at this stage for this awesome match. Dunne goes back to the injured fingers and arms of Danny Burch for the eventual submission win after an incredible 16-minute match. What a showing by both men. But Danny Burch made himself some new fans after this match, and Pete Dunne regains his title in another highly recommended, hard-hitting and exciting match. Definitely the best NXT UK match so far, and one to go out of your way to watch. The match goes off the air with the champion standing victorious on the wrap. Probably the best episode of NXT UK in the 4 weeks so far. From here we head straight into what should be next week's episode, but as per last week they are playing back-to-back NXT UK episodes, so anything I referred to earlier as showing next week is actually hour 2 on this September the 7th episode. The show opens with Wolfgang and the Coffee Brothers arriving at the venue ahead of their main event, which is a 6-man match later on tonight against Mark Andrews, Flash Morgan Webster and Ashton Smith. From here, there's a clip from the Mae Young Classic final match between Toni Storm and Io Shirai at the Evolution pay-per-view a couple of weeks ago. We go straight into the Toni Storm versus Dakota Kai match. This week we see Toni Storm make her entrance in the much hyped match against Dakota Kai. I must be honest to say that I do enjoy Dakota's music, entrance and her character, but I do feel that WWE haven't used her to the best of her abilities, especially during the mini feud with Shayna Baszler a couple of months ago on the main NXT show, which showed Dakota as a pretty weak individual that didn't do her any favours at the time. Anyway, I'm a fan of hers and enjoy her matches, and I hope that the NXT UK brand will be a good outlet for Dakota to show us what she's capable of. The fans are firmly behind Toni as 2 women lock up in the early stages. Dakota takes control with a stiff kick to the chest for an early 2 count. Nigel McGuinness makes note that Toni Storm was the longest reigning Progress Women's Champion, holding the title for just shy of 1 year. Toni takes control with a version of an STF that looked more vicious than anything John Cena has ever done with the move. Some stiff forearms from Kai, leading to a reverse kick to Storm, and a double headbutt from both superstars knocked them both to the canvas. Storm hit an impressive snap German suplex to Kai, followed by an impressive running kick into the corner from Dakota Kai. However, Toni made yet another impressive comeback with a second snap German, followed by the Storm Zero finisher, which is like a shoulder breaker for the 3 count and victory in just under 7 minutes. A good match between these 2 impressive competitors, and I'd like to see more from these 2 in the future. As Dakota exited the ring and started to make her way up the ramp, she was hit with a surprise attack from Jinny, who we have seen in an impressive set of vignettes over the last few weeks, with Jinny finally making her debut in a bit of a sneak attack, sending out a clear message to Toni Storm and the rest of the female locker room and the UK audience, stating that this is my NXT UK. Toni Storm eventually helped Dakota Kai to her feet as they made their way backstage, so some interesting storyline development there. Up next we've got Amir Jordan versus Zach Gibson, Liverpool's number 1. Massive crowd heat for Gibson as he enters the ring to a chorus of boos and chants such as "shoes off if you hate Gibson." Despite an impressive running crossbody from Jordan, Gibson takes control with a clothesline, a short arm lever and an overhead throw. Jordan takes the initiative with some high-flying moves to take Gibson off his feet for a 2 count. However, this comeback was short-lived as Gibson hit the helter-skelter, followed by the Shankly Gate submission hold for the victory after just 5 minutes. Following the match, Gibson gets on the mic with an in-ring promo to a backdrop of boos from the fans in Cambridge. Gibson says that every day that he steps foot in that ring is another day closer to being the NXT UK champion. He won the 2nd annual UK Championship tournament from the Royal Albert Hall, you may remember from June. He beat Noam Dar a couple of weeks ago in one of the first episodes of NXT UK. Gibson goes on to say that he is the guy to build a brand around until he is interrupted by Trent Seven on the rampway. Trent explains that in the Empress Ballroom in 2017, he, along with friends Pete Dunne and others, kicked the whole thing off with the UK scene in the WWE. While Gibson was at home on his mum's laptop watching them make history on the WWE network. Trent congratulated Gibson for winning the UK Championship tournament at the Royal Albert Hall, but that he couldn't get the job done on night 2 against Pete Dunne. Trent gets into the ring and throws out an immediate challenge to Gibson right there and then. But Gibson rolls out of the ring, declining the challenge from 7, possibly leading to a match in the near future. Next up, we see a promo from Kenny Williams ahead of the next match on this Hour 2 show, which will be against Jordan Devlin. So, Kenny Williams versus Jordan Devlin. Now, I like Williams as a character, although I'm not sure he'll be a contender for any top spots in NXT UK anytime soon. However, Jordan Devlin, on the other hand, is someone that I'm very excited about. I recently heard a podcast with him on the Flash Morgan Webster podcast a couple of weeks ago, and it told a very interesting story of how Devlin very nearly threw it all in after the inaugural UK Championship tournament in Blackpool early 2017, as he was not happy with himself as a wrestler, especially after his 2 matches against Danny Burch and then the eventual winner and the first UK champion Tyler Bate in the second round. However, after some evaluation, and he remotivated himself and turned in a year's worth of stellar performances in OTT professional wrestling in Ireland, where he went undefeated for a whole year and was a very dominant OTT World Heavyweight Champion. Devlin feels like he's transformed his career in the last 18 months to the point where he feels that he is someone to keep a close eye on, and I completely agree. Both men show a lot of athleticism, with Devlin getting the first 2 count of the match. Devlin goes to the eyes of Williams as he gains control of the match. Even McGuinness acknowledges Devlin's new aggressive attitude as they take it to the outside with a wrecking ball drop kick through the ropes onto Devlin, followed by a suicide dive. Williams nails Devlin with a top rope elbow for another 2 count. Williams hits a great looking face plant for another 2 count, with the crowd getting firmly behind the fan favourite from Scotland. However, all of this was short-lived as Devlin hit his Island's Call finishing move for a convincing win. Next up, we have the main event of Hour 2 between Flash Morgan Webster, Mark Andrews and Ashton Smith versus the Coffey Brothers and Wolfgang. The Coffey Brothers looked dominant in the early stages of this match as the heels cut the ring in half, keeping control of Smith and Andrews, with the babyfaces struggling to gain any advantage in the first 5 minutes. Plenty of rest holds in the first half of the match, wearing down Mark Andrews as Webster and Smith strained for the tag on the other side of the ring. After a stun dog millionaire, Andrews finally managed to get the tag to Webster, and the faces made a strong comeback with some quick offense from Webster and then Ashton Smith. Smith is a tall and muscular guy who looks to have a bright future with NXT UK, but his offense was short-lived before he was able to make a quick tag to Mark Andrews, and with Andrews knocking Joe Coffey and Wolfgang out of the ring before a double dive from Smith and Andrews to the outside onto the heels. Webster was just about to complete his dive to the outside before being halted by a jaw-jacking clothesline from Wolfgang. Webster managed to reverse an attempted powerbomb by Wolfgang into a Hurricane Rana, sending Wolfgang to the outside with his fellow heels, finally allowing Flash Morgan Webster to hit a senton from the top turnbuckle to the crowd of heels and teammates on the outside. Quite an impressive move there from Webster. Webster managed to get a 2 count on Wolfgang, but after some interference from the Coffey Brothers on Smith and Andrews on the ring apron, Wolfgang hit a surprise spear on Webster before tagging in Joe Coffey to hit his discus lariat, finishing Webster off with a strong 3 count and the victory for the heels to end Hour 2 of this NXT UK show. Overall, a very good couple of hours of wrestling action from NXT UK, with the highlights of it being the main event of Hour 1 between Pete Dunne and Danny Burch, which was a very solid, very exciting back and forth 16-minute main event. I also enjoyed the squash matches involving Dave Mastiff and Eddie Dennis in Hour 1, as well as the 6-man tag match that we've just seen. NXT UK is definitely on a roll, and I already cannot wait for next week's episodes. Next week we'll see a huge announcement from NXT UK General Manager Johnny Sate regarding the future of NXT and its up and coming Birmingham shows. This week's highlights from the regular NXT from Full Sail was the debut of the King of Bros, Matt Riddle. This guy has it all, and with his personality, charisma, his look and his moves, he could not only be a future star for NXT, but I, along with many others, believe that he is easily could be the future of the WWE and the industry as a whole in the next 5 years. He has even gone out publicly on Twitter to announce that he would like to be the one who retires Brock Lesnar in the future. Now that's a match I would definitely like to see. Not sure if it will ever happen, but you can dream. Triple H went in for surgery this week after tearing his pectoral muscle during his match alongside Shawn Michaels in Shawn Michaels' comeback match after 8 years of being retired versus The Undertaker and Kane at the Crown Jewel event in Saudi Arabia last Friday. He's almost certain to miss out on any wrestling action over the next year, meaning that he will also likely miss out on his expected match with Batista at WrestleMania 35 in April. So, who will be Batista's eventual possible opponent at the Show of Shows in April? Could it be Evolution teammates Randy Orton? That seems to be the name going around at the moment. If the match is going to go ahead with Batista at all, it's likely to be against the Viper. Going back to NXT, and with Takeover taking place next Saturday, the night before the Survivor Series, the card for Takeover Wargames is starting to look complete. It's going to be highlighted by a Wargames match, the second year in a row with the Undisputed Era, with Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, Bobby Fish and Roderick Strong taking on the foursome of Pete Dunne, Ricochet and the War Raiders. You'll also get to see a 2 out of 3 falls match pitting NXT Women's Champion Shayna Baszler against Kairi Sane in a 2 out of 3 falls match, and with the other horsewomen combatants getting involved in Shayna Baszler and Kairi Sane's match at Evolution. Expect to see some interference there and quite an interesting 2 out of 3 falls match. Matt Riddle is likely to make his Takeover debut against Cassius Ohno, and Tommaso Ciampa, the NXT champion, will take on the Velveteen Dream for the NXT Championship match, unless they add a third challenger or another challenger in the shape of Lars Sullivan. Now, there's been reports that there will only be 4 matches at this up-and-coming Takeover Wargames special, as opposed to the usual 5. So this may be a 4-match card only, although if there's likely to be 5 matches, it could possibly be the grudge match between Aleister Black and Johnny Gargano. We'll find out more in this week's NXT. Survivor Series will take place the night after NXT Takeover Wargames, and currently the matches are looking pretty strong, where it's mostly champion versus champion from the Raw brand and the SmackDown Live brand. Headlining the card will be WWE Universal Champion Brock Lesnar versus WWE Champion from the SmackDown side AJ Styles. And there will be the traditional 5-on-5 Raw men versus SmackDown men match, as well as a 5-on-5 tag match from both brands, and a 5-on-5 women's match as well. Seth Rollins will take on Shinsuke Nakamura. Seth Rollins, obviously the Intercontinental Champion, versus the WWE United States Champion in Nakamura. The match I'm most looking forward to, though, is going to be the WWE Raw Women's Champion Ronda Rousey versus the WWE SmackDown Live Champion Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch is definitely proven to be the hottest commodity in all of WWE at the moment, and I think that match with Rousey will be a show stealer. Next week we'll be looking at the Survivor Series card in a lot more detail, previewing and running down the matches that have been announced, and focusing a little bit more on some of the 5-on-5 matches. Didn't go into much detail previously, as well as looking again at the NXT UK episodes from the 14th of November, and a look at the Go Home episode of NXT ahead of NXT Takeover Wargames. So, if you have any questions about the show, anything you'd like to ask about up-and-coming shows, you can email me at wrestlingwithjohners@gmail.com. That's wrestlingwithjohners@gmail.com. give us your feedback about the show. Please get in touch. You can also get in touch with me via my Twitter page, and that's at withjohners_WWJ, at withjohners_WWJ, or you can visit my YouTube page just by searching Johners Wrestling. I hope you've enjoyed this premiere episode of Wrestling with Johners. I've thoroughly enjoyed doing it. The quality of the show, the content, my presentation style is only likely to get better, so please spread the word and keep listening. Regular weekly episodes will drop every Thursday or Friday, so don't miss out. Take care, thank you very much, and we'll speak to you all soon. Bye bye.